today's video, I'm going to talk about UTI or urinary tract infection and circumcision in male infants. I wanted to talk about this topic because we experienced it ourselves. We experienced it with our son. It was a very challenging moment for us because he is our first son. We didn't have this experience with our daughter, our firstborn, because she's a she. This is very new to us, like how to clean a male genitalia, because I'm a woman and my husband knows better than me. So I just wanted to share this experience of ours. Let me do a backstory first before we, dig deep into talking about circumcision and urinary tract infection. So we brought our son to the emergency room for his UTI, and we brought him in twice. So the first one was when he was 2+ months old. I really didn't have any idea that could happen to us, because most people, if you talk about urinary tract infection or UTI, they mostly correlate that to unchanged dirty diapers, and that's what my mom told me when I informed her that we brought our son to the ER for his UTI. So, but that wasn't the case. It's just that some male infants are prone or at risk for urinary tract infection, although when compared to data between male and female infants, female are more susceptible, or female are more at risk for urinary tract infection because we have shorter urethra. So if there's any bacterial infection or viral infection in the urinary tract, it will go, like, the travel time for the virus is shorter when in the female urinary tract, because we have shorter urethra, again, as I've mentioned, compared to male. So I wasn't really expecting that. I know that for a fact, but I'm not expecting that to happen to my son. So it all started one morning. We were having breakfast, me and my family, and I looked at him because I just put him down for his morning nap. He was on his bouncer swing, and then when I looked and glanced at him, he was like shivering, like a very weird shivering, which alarmed me and the whole family, because we haven't experienced that with him and with our daughter as well. So it was very alarming for us. So I checked on him and put my the back of my palm on his forehead, and he was pretty warm at that time. Not too much though. I didn't know what was his temperature at that time because I didn't get the thermometer yet. With my anxiety and worry and fear, I went ahead and looked for our thermometer to check his temperature. It first started around 37.8, so I wasn't worried that much during that time. And then so I tried to console him, and he wasn't really crying, but he's making this grunting noise as if he was in pain. That's what's really alarming for us during that time. So I checked his temperature again and went up to 38.9. At that time I started to panic. I didn't know what to do. Should we bring him to the ER? Should we give him some infant Tylenol? Checked his temperature again and it went up to 39.2. And again, I've mentioned that he was just 2 months old at that time, so roughly around 8 weeks. And I've heard, I think when I delivered him at the hospital, that because there's paperwork and the nurses have to let you know as to how you take care of your baby. That's a protocol here in Canada. And I think I remember that when your baby has a fever of 38 or 39 under 8 weeks, or within that age mark, you have to bring him into the emergency room. So we went ahead, brought him to the emergency room to have him checked and you know that when you are in the emergency room, there's triage of lineup of what's really urgent, who really needs urgent care on the lineup. And I think our case was really critical because we got inside immediately when I tried to sign in and gave it our information. I can't remember how many, but roughly around 8 to 10 people gathered around our bed, and that was, oh my god, that was really alarming for me. I wasn't expecting that so many people to look at my son's case. So and it was just me in the emergency room, because at that time they only allow one parent in the emergency room. So that was heart-wrenching for me. I wasn't really prepared for that to happen. Fast forward, we went inside, and then he had his rectal temperature done because it's more accurate. So they did that, and still was high at that time, 39 point something, roughly around. They did some tests to find out like what's really happening, why is he having a fever. At that time they didn't found out that he has a urinary tract infection. So the first thing they did was super scared. They did a spinal tap on him, a spinal tap. So they had to poke the tip of his spine to get some fluid as a sample and test if he has meningitis. And we've heard that meningitis is a very critical condition, especially to an 8-week-old son. So I was crying, sobbing on the hallway because I didn't know what to do, and the doctor asked me to, you know, relax and compose myself at the end of the hallway. So I need to go there and sit and like just compose myself because they are taking good care of my son. Of course, as a mom, I still was very anxious at that time because we didn't know what's really happening with him. So the second test they did was blood work and urine test. That's when they found out that the urine that they extracted from him, because they were using catheter because he wasn't peeing at that time, had grown some bacteria in it, which means that it's affecting his urinary tract, which causes the infection, which causes the fever. So that's when we found out that it's not meningitis, thank God. It was urinary tract infection. But another thing that really was alarming for the doctors and of course for me was his irregular high heart rate. And they said that it's very uncommon for, you know, that infants that young to have, because his heart rate went up to 200. Yes, 200. Didn't really scream crying. Easily settles with just the pacifier and milk and like with my touch and with my voice. That night actually his fever again spiked up to 40. And I really noticed the skin was like, it's very unusual, and like I think 3 nurses gathered around, put some damp washcloth all over his body to, you know, neutralize his temperature. That was also another thing that was nerve-wracking, but thankfully at that time my husband was in the room. After that one, they gave him some Tylenol, and the fever, it really wasn't helping, so they need to give him Advil, infant Advil, to like lower down the temperature. At that point it was just too much for him, the fever, the infection, the heart rate. So they had to keep a close eye on him. So we stayed for the night, and the following day he has to go through this x-ray procedure. It's actually, I have my script here. They call it the cystography. It's an imaging that can help diagnose problems in your bladder. They were assuming that his urine flow refluxes back to the tract. That's why it causes the urinary tract infection. That's why he has to go that x-ray procedure. I actually didn't cry for that whole procedure. I was actually so proud and so happy. I was with my husband, thankfully, at that time during the procedure. So what they did was they used a catheter to take out all of the urine first, and then they inserted some dye, a red dye I think, or any contrast dye, but I think the imaging lady mentioned that it's a red dye, and then they will see if the urine will reflux back to his bladder. The result came in, I think, late that night, and thankfully there wasn't any some sort of reflux with his urine, but one part of his bladder I think is inflamed. That's probably the main area where the infection is going on, and that's what's they're trying to solve and treat. But at least at that point we were able to know what's really happening. Is it an inflammation? Is it a reflux or something? Now we were given the answers late that night, and it was somehow reassuring. So the following day we stayed for another night. He is still being monitored for his heart rate. Thankfully his heart rate went down. He was still on Tylenol and Advil to, you know, neutralized his fever. Thankfully, for the following day, it wasn't that bad anymore. I think it just went up to 37 something and then 38. The following day, we were cleared to go home, and he was still on his antibiotics. That was through his IV at that time when we stayed at the hospital. But when we went home, we were prescribed with a different antibiotics that we had to use for 7 days, and that was fine. It actually went well. So we went home. It was a lovely 3 weeks after that incident, and I thought it wouldn't happen, but it did after 3 weeks. So it wasn't even a month since he had a UTI. When your baby has UTI, it would be a reoccurring incident, so you go to the hospital quite often to treat the infection. I wasn't really expecting for it to be that soon, because I kind of mentioned it was just 3 weeks after that incident. We went back to the hospital again, straight to the emergency room. Same thing happened. He was hooked up to the IV and everything, and antibiotics. He has a fever at that time. It was around 38.8. It wasn't very alarming, but since there was a fever, it means that there's something going on, like on the inside. Maybe the infection came back, maybe it worsened. I'm not really sure at that point. So we were in the emergency room. Oh my god, it took us about an hour and a half to get the IV in. I'm not sure how they did that during the first time, because it was just a one poke. Second time around, oh, they have to call the anesthetic unit to have someone to do an imaging in order to get the IV in, and one of the nurses suggested to have it on his head, and hell not. I said no, we can try again, but not on the head. They said it's pretty normal and it's pretty common, but I just don't want to see my son having an IV attached to his head. So it took us about an hour and a half. They tried both of his arms and his feet and like legs, but no luck. Thankfully, after an hour and a half of trying, they were able to get the IV onto his right arm. Yes, but it took them again an hour and a half to do that. But thankfully, they put the IV in, and then we were brought into our room later that night, and the fever was still there, but it wasn't that bad. So they still give him some Tylenol and Advil just to again neutralize the fever, because I was the one left during that time, and then my husband went home for our daughter, our toddler. Our toddler is at home with my mother-in-law. So I talked, and I was scheduled to have a talk with the urologist team who is responsible for my son's case. So I talked with one of the doctors of the team, and I asked, this is the time when I asked and mentioned about the circumcision. Like, I did some research through Google, but I don't recommend Googling your son or even yourself's symptoms, because it will just drive you crazy. And that's what happened to me. I Googled and Googled, and I found out that 1 in 1,000 male infants is at risk of urinary tract infection. Why my son? Like, why? I was having that like questions running around my head. I wasn't really able to sleep, and I was blaming myself why that happened. Just wasn't good for me and for my mental health. They actually have different answers, because I talked to a different doctor that first time that we went to the emergency room, and he said that no, it wasn't really a huge correlation between urinary tract infection and a circumcised baby. But this time, that doctor really said that she believes that one of the reasons why my son is at risk of urinary tract infection is because he is uncircumcised. After the second time that we went to the emergency room, we were released the following day, and he was on a different antibiotics. I suspect a stronger one compared to the antibiotics that he was taking during our first emergency visit. But it went on to 10 days. So instead of 7 days, he was taking his antibiotics for 10 days. Aside from the antibiotics that we have to take home that he has to consume for 10 days, we were also prescribed of like a liquid form, something to clean his genitalia. And this is one thing that I was mind blown. this might be too much information, but you have to let the foreskin be visible so that you can clean the area, that area. You know what I mean? My husband didn't tell me about it, that's how you clean a male's genitalia. So yeah, I think I blamed myself for that as well because I wasn't informed, which I should have. But that's how I clean my son's genitalia now. I have to keep the foreskin visible so that I can clean the top, so the viruses and bacteria will not go inside his urinary tract. Let's talk about circumcision. So again, I'm looking at my script here. I don't really have that much knowledge because I'm a woman and I don't really talk with my husband about it. And so I don't have that much knowledge and information about circumcision. But what I do know about circumcision is that, especially in our culture, I'm from the Philippines, most male children are going through circumcision process when they are about 4th, 5th, 6th grade. So we weren't looking into circumcision option when we had our son. But the common thing here in Canada is that they have an option to have your son circumcised the moment they're born. So they have an option. So before you get admitted to the hospital for your delivery, you have to sign through paperwork and stuff, and there's a box that you have to check if you wanted to have your son circumcised, and this is the process, blah blah blah. I really wasn't thinking about having my son circumcised because, again, it's pretty uncommon in the Philippines. But I've heard that in other cultures, circumcision is such a big event. It's a big occasion. It's very fascinating to know that circumcision is such a huge occasion and event with other culture that they have to celebrate. And yeah, this calls for a celebration when someone they know is circumcised in the family. Other cultures treat that as a holy and a sacred event and occasion for their son's life. But also, I do know other cultures which think that circumcising your baby the moment they're born is very unethical, or even like the circumcision process in general is unethical. So they would choose to not have their son circumcised at all, which is fine because those are the family's preferences and it's fine with their son as well. So I don't see any problems with that. We were looking into circumcision procedure with our son's age. Now we have a fee because they think it's harder to have the baby circumcised at that age compared to when they were born because they doesn't wiggle that much. I don't know, I'm not really sure, but we have a fee to look into if we're planning to have him circumcised. He doesn't have any fever now and he's doing good, he's doing fine, he's healthy, he's babbling a lot. Yeah, thankfully we don't have to go to the emergency room again for the same reason or for any reasons. Like, I hate the hospital. In conclusion, I do believe that a circumcised male is prone to urinary tract infection, and it's because of the foreskin that's not really cleaned very well with just wipes and like water. There's like some crevices underneath that might like a breeder for virus which will go inside the urinary tract infection. So yes, I do believe that male uncircumcised children or infants are susceptible or at risk to urinary tract infection. Do we have to get our son circumcised? It's actually up to you. It's actually up to us if we wanted to get him circumcised at this age or maybe on a later date. We still have to decide and talk to my husband about it. If you learned something from this video, or if you have a similar experience, or if you know someone, or if you know some parents who you think might have a son that has a urinary tract infection and is uncircumcised, you can share this video to them and have them informed. I hope this video is helpful and insightful. Really appreciate if you can leave some like, some comment, share this away to your friends, and subscribe to the red subscribe button down here. Again, my name is Pauline. Thank you so much for supporting me as a small content creator. I will see you in the next video. Bye!